Well, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. He's been a good friend of ours. We've known him for a long time from the Virginia Beach Sportsplex, and we've just been, he runs a great program. What he's done, they chose a few years ago, and we were lucky enough to get them to make Virginia Beach Sportsplex their home. And we've watched a few of his teams, need to say, and it's just, he runs a great program. And this year, rewarded by all his hard work for his second state championship for the VISA. It's Coach Wayne Lance.
Thank you. It's definitely an honor, and I'd like to encourage you guys to continue doing what you're doing. I know as a dad who has a son coaching at the college level and then two in college playing their sports, but they're not free, and then two still in school, in high school and middle school. Scholarships are a huge way to get things paid for, and every little bit matters. So I know as a dad, and then having a son who's a coach and trying to package kids together to get them to get an education, having all the scholarship money that you guys help provide is extremely important. Thank you to you guys for having me. I hope you guys can gain something or enjoy what we're going to talk about. And thank you to Chuck for asking me. I'm really blessed to do what I do. I've been doing this for 26 years.
You're not that old.
That makes me feel old. I know some of you will argue that, but coaching years are different. It's like dog years. But to think, I'm originally from Scranton, Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a coal miner. So I'd like to think that I carry some of his hard work and getting up every day and doing what I do and having a passion to do what I do deep down in my blood. I was, just some background, I attended Liberty University, and my senior year, as I was preparing to do my student teaching, I figured the best way to get into coaching is to get coaching. And I'd done that a little bit in college with like YMCA basketball and some things like that, but a friend of mine recommended me going to EC Glass High School and getting involved, and their coach back then was Bo Henson, who had some successful programs and played Ronald Curry and Allen Iverson in state title games and other years. So Bo had me come on, and it's funny, his way of checking guys out was, I'll put you with our freshman team. And some guys wouldn't show back up. Nowadays it's tough. A kid comes in out of college with or without playing experience and thinks he should be an offensive coordinator immediately. So there was no working your way up. So here I am as a college student, both my wife and I working odd jobs, but knew that was my calling, I guess is the best way to say, is to coach young people. And I became a volunteer 9th grade coach, coaching the offensive and defensive lines that I knew nothing about, so I was kind of self-taught in those areas. Wasn't a college football player, had the opportunity to play some Division III college football, but the money did not work out. I wish there was the Virginia Beach Sports Club back then for where I was. But I was able to spend 5 years as an assistant coach at EC Glass, and then became a head coach at what is now Liberty Christian Academy. Was fortunate there to coach some great ball players. I had a lot of guys go on and play college ball in the 3 years I was there. And then made my way to Kokomo, Indiana. I was a head coach at a 5A's program out there, and then I've been 15 years here at Atlantic Shores. So 26 years as a coach, 21 as a head coach. So I was that young guy with his wife and dragging his kids all over the place, trying to show them up at practice. My kids have pretty much grown up on a practice field or in a gym somewhere, doing all those things. So our journey to the 2021 state championship probably began in 2019. I had some coaches who had been with me for a long time and were great men, great assistants. One was a former ball player at Navy when Nick Saban and Steve Belichick and some of these names you probably know, and just kind of like what Alabama is today, I believe Navy was probably back then as far as putting coaches out. The coaches that he told me that he had played for were either ACC head coaches. George Welsh was his head coach, and different people like that. And so I had this great group of guys that I was able to work with. But they also had other lives. They weren't teachers. They were workers in the community and different businessmen. And I think at some point life just said, hey, I need to go do these things, and coaching isn't in the cards. So I had a complete changeover of assistant coaches. not one of them was able to return, and so I started our workout season by myself. And slowly but surely, one coach at a time, guys just had moved in the area, you know somebody, I know somebody, and those guys came along. And it was at that point that for years I'd been hoping to do some different things within our program that I just didn't want to change, but it was the time to change. We were going to change the way we practice, the way we work out, some of the things in the off season. Some we're going to carry through. For example, we start our workouts today for the 2022 season. But we choose a leadership team. We draft the guys in our program and we create competition teams without it. And we do some different things. We've been doing those for years. But changing the way you practice, and if you've always practiced a certain way, it's difficult to flip that switch as a coach and to kind of do some of the newfangled, non-traditional things. Taking a walkthrough day on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday and doing some different things like that. So it was a time to implement some of these changes. And we were rewarded by having a team that I laugh at now. My son was a senior in that class, and there were a bunch of guys who'd come through our program through middle school. We had 2 kids over 200 pounds on that team. And when you're pushing a lot of weight around on other teams, we went 7-5 and made it to the state semifinals. It was a really great year for those guys. But I love the camaraderie that they had. And because of that team, as the off-season progressed, suddenly there were other kids within our school who wanted to play that hadn't been playing. I think we lost our entire receiver corps to graduation, but the next year, 2020, we decided to play in the fall. Our school allowed us to go ahead with plans to play, and there were 10 teams in the state that also said they would play. So we're able to figure out 6 weeks of football games, and we're able to go ahead and play. But within that, a lot of those kids on the 2019 team encouraged a lot of guys to come out and play. One of our players whose college wasn't ready to start up, they were virtual, he was able to stay and coach and help get some of the receivers right, which allowed us to go into that next season and have success. We were 5-1. I joke with the guys now that we haven't lost a game since 10-10-20, and I'd like to keep it that way for a while. So we were 5-1 in that shortened season. But by playing in that shortened season in the midst of COVID and trying to figure out how we're doing things like this and having our install meetings in a classroom, what's the best way for us to space out and teach the game, but make sure that we're not close enough to each other that if anything happens, we don't have to shut down. So our administration did an excellent job of encouraging us, or here's this space. Our band room is a little bit bigger than this, and so we're able to put our chairs a certain amount of feet apart and just make sure we had whatever graphics we needed and things that we had to teach. So it kind of kept us on schedule to continue the process of building young men and getting them to do the things that we've been doing and teach the game. We'd like to consider ourselves a developmental coaching staff, but to continue us developing our young players. We only had 2 seniors in 2020 that played for us. So having 31 guys coming back, and sometimes we have players who don't come back for whatever reason, school-wise, or they decide they move. Obviously, this is an area with military, people coming in, people leaving at different times. So we had a good number of kids coming back prior to the season, but by playing last fall in 2020, we were able to kind of keep our off-season plans on track. So in January, when we opened the weight room, it opened on time, where a lot of teams were figuring out a schedule to play in the spring. And while that allowed them to play into the spring, we were allowed to go in the weight room and begin building bodies and getting guys to come together as a team. So it was exciting. It kept things regular. Our off-season last year allowed us to grow a little differently. We were able to participate in 7-on-7 at the Sportsplex that was run by Norfolk Indoor Sports. They do a great job. Ron Whitcomb, who used to be the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator at ODU, is now at Buffalo, owns that group, and he did a great job of putting together a middle school 7-on-7, which went for 6 weeks. So we took all our middle school guys over and had them working, watched them grow a little bit, and our varsity coaches got to coach them. So that was fun, a little different, a little stressful for some of my assistant coaches, especially when you're not used to working with the younger guys. And then they had another one in May, and we were fortunate enough to participate in that and go undefeated. And a lot of times we draw those comparisons because we're a private school. we probably have close to 300 kids in our high school, but there's 130 boys. And so when there's 130 boys, it's a lot to try to pull an entire football team together. I would say my smallest team at Atlantic Shores had 28 players on it, which was our 2019, ironically. And then last year's team had 39. The largest team I've ever had at Atlantic Shores was 42 young men on our team. So really stretching guys to play, but also they play other sports too. So it's really awesome for us in a smaller setting. There's not always other teams that we would necessarily match up against, such as Ocean Lakes and Oscar Smith and other teams you probably are more familiar with. But we do tend to compete with them in a lot of different areas, especially with our skill position players, our receivers, quarterbacks, defensive backs. So we were able to go through our 7-on-7 playing Grassfield, Cox, Great Bridge, and be able to make it through that session undefeated, playing 5 weekends and 10 games. It was a lot of fun. I think a lot of people will look at 7-on-7 and say, you're not hitting, you're not playing, but for us, it's the opportunity to compete. And just teaching kids how to compete. A lot of kids want it easy, have everything planned out for them, and we put our guys in a situation where they can compete on a high level, and win or lose, it just gave us teachable moments. Fortunately, we were able to win. Sometimes when you win, it's harder to teach because everybody thinks they got all the answers. But our guys were pretty good. But challenging them was an awesome time. We even made our way up to William and Mary and played in their 7-on-7 tournament, again, against a high level of competition. We were able to beat a Phoebus, who played for a state title in the public school league. We lost by 2 in the last minute of a game to Stonebridge. We beat Maury in the state championship game at ODU. So we put ourselves in a position where our guys were confident and they knew they could play on a high level against some of the best teams in the state, public or private. And so it was just a continual thing. And with our guys, even the linemen show up to 7-on-7 to encourage other guys. You know, and I think they hope I'll put them in at linebacker or something. And sometimes they do. But we have a good time with them. Even our quarterbacks, they don't mind. The young ones mind sitting and snapping the ball for the starting quarterback, because they'll turn around and they'll watch what they're watching. They're willing to teach themselves along with listening to their coaches. So August rolls around and we're back to answering all those questions. How are we going to meet? How are we going to do contact? What do we want to do? And we were pretty fortunate this year to really not have very many issues. I think our kids understood that if they wanted to have a season and if we were going to be as good as we hoped to be, we were going to have to look out for our teammates, be careful with how we are and what we're doing and where we go. I think those guys, they weren't very difficult to encourage in that manner. I think they understood what was at stake. So we found ways to do our thing. We had a scrimmage against St. Anne's Belfield, who's from the Charlottesville area. But even them traveling down was a question, you know, all right, we're going to put our whole team on a bus. You know, how our team's going to handle this? But we were able to have a great scrimmage and really begin our season well. Our first 5 games, we went out 5-0, but every kid on our team was able to play in each of those games, which gave us a lot of experience. Even we have a team where we have 2 8th graders. We're allowed to play 8th graders on varsity. One of the things with that, my rule is you can still play middle school unless you're starting, but it gives them an opportunity. If they really desire to do that, they've got to be at everything. And even if they're not playing much, they're learning, they're getting the hang of things, and they're encouraging even their younger teammates, like, you can do this, I'm doing this, and I'm comfortable around the older guys. And our older guys do a really great job of kind of looking after their little brothers, so to speak. So it's something that's exciting for me, and those guys really take on to, and it builds depth and experience. And you know, we were able to have some early season injuries that weren't season ending, but those young guys were then able to step in bigger roles, which I'll get to in a moment, and gain a lot of experience. And we were going to need that experience. I think our first matchup against a great team was Nansman Suffolk Academy. Coach Beal, who played in Virginia Beach, great guy. He's the head coach at Nansman Suffolk, and he always prepares his guys well. Their star player, George Pettaway, is signed to play at North Carolina. So that was a battle-tested thing that was really probably looking back on it, the first big game that our kids had been anticipating the whole time. I mean, every week they were great about tuning in and blocking things out, but I think they had that circle because a lot of our guys know George. A lot of our guys are aware of what was at stake, and they ended up being the 3 seed in our playoffs, so I think they felt like it was a great test for them. And we were able to pull out a victory, I believe 33-7, but they did a great job of shutting George down on that particular night and holding him to 23 yards defensively. So there was a lot of challenges. And even through the course of the season, you know, we started the season, I was calling offense and defense. My staff was working to fill in some of the other voids, and one of my staff members stepped up and started calling the defense so I could pass on that to him, and Coach Beatty's done an excellent job at that. So the NSA game was like kind of the big start to what I call the second season. We played a smaller team who was ranked first in the state in their division, St. Michael's, the Archangel, which is out of Fredericksburg. A little different going into that game. They play in Fredericksburg at a field house. Their field house is not exactly lined for football, so they use the right markings, the right width. It really makes you appreciate playing in a place like the Sportsplex, where you're trying to guess, is that the yard line? These are the hashes. We hit traffic on the way up, so we're an hour and a half late for what I normally like as a warm-up. Like our first group goes on the field an hour and a half before kickoff. I like everything to go a certain way. And we got there an hour and a half before kickoff, and then you go inside, there's not a locker room, you're changing in the men's bathroom, and so kids are going in waves. I want group 1 on the field as fast as possible. We're not warming up. We're playing a wing T team who's not, we don't see that every week, we don't practice that every week, so you got some changes. They're huge. They average 390 across the line. Their running back is 6'4", 240, and has a great future ahead of him, and he's just a junior. So yeah, it had all the makings for an issue. We were able to come out and score early, but midway through the second quarter, my starting quarterback, who was a Division I commit, they tackle him, twist his ankle, he's got to come out. And so this battle of back and forth begins to play itself out. Now, how he was able to go back on the field and play on one foot and pretty much take every snap like this, I still look back on. I mean, I may have encouraged my offensive line to make sure he doesn't get touched. Amazingly enough, whatever was said at halftime worked, because he did not get touched the rest of the game while he was in. He broke the school record that night with 6 touchdown passes. I think he was 15 of 19 for 434 yards in the air. Our leading receiver that night had 5 catches for 337 yards and 4 touchdowns. Just a great matchup. We found some matchups, we were able to go to it. We won 51-36, but it came at a cost for a little bit. We lost some guys to injury that weren't season ending, but we were banged up getting back on that bus. And amazingly, we had a straight ride back home. We didn't have to worry about traffic that night. But it created that. It was neat to see some of those young guys have to step up in roles and get us to a lead to where we could take our quarterback out. Start the next week against a team that had been a state power in the Blue Ridge School, which is a boarding school, with 2 of my quarterbacks injured. One was a part-time receiver, another one not at school. And so our 8th grade quarterback had to basically take a lot of the snaps in practice on a Monday, which was a great experience. He handled it well. I think the guys kind of gave him the side eye, and then he played. I mean, he just balled out in practice. Let us keep going in a way that even though we'd hoped to have our quarterback Friday night, we were able to practice like we would have practiced on a normal day had our quarterback been there. And it was encouraging to me, and I think the rest of the team. We still came up with some contingency plans and getting our running back some snaps in case we decided to have to do that and go on that route. But you know, one thing I appreciate about these guys is that no matter what obstacle came up, we were able to figure it out. They bought in and they continue to roll. So we were able to win our next couple games. 2 weeks later, we're playing Fredericksburg Christian, which is a private school. They won the 2018 state championship. Talented group of young guys. They're a younger team. You know, they're a wing T team, but we show up to their place. We're able to go down and score. They come back and score. They onside kick it. And that was going to be their game. They were going to drain the clock and hold it as long as they could so that we couldn't get the ball and score. And I mean, we had a high-powered offense. We don't have, you know, our kids, if I say huddle, they kind of look at me and laugh because we don't huddle. So it was one of those moments where we had a lot of adversity. It's one of those October days when it's like unseasonably warm, and you were already like in the cold mindset. So all those kids who wore those extra layers are sweating at halftime and trying to rip their sleeves off. I told you it's going to be warm today. You know, put it on the scouting report, 85. But you know, guys are suddenly cramping. It's hot. I didn't get enough water, and you know, just making sure we were right. We ended up scoring 70 points. It was 70-41 as a final. But at halftime, I want to say we got a score before half off of a turnover, and we went into half like 31-23, and then got the ball and scored again, which created a little bit of breathing room. But there was a lot of tension and pressure. Our last regular season game was at the Sportsplex against Portsmouth Christian, who won the Division III state title, and that's a rivalry game for us. You know, there are two coaches on that staff that have played for me and are over there working now. Again, our players all know each other. We're in the same conference for all of our other sports. So it's always a great battle, and it tests both of our teams before we head on into the playoffs. First round of playoffs, we were able to see Fredericksburg Christian again, and obviously we were able to make some adjustments off of film and won that game 47-0, which then came our much anticipated matchup, and it's kind of ironic looking back now. I'm friends with the coach at the North Cross School in Roanoke, and he was on vacation back in August, and he posted a picture on Instagram. I was going through my phone this weekend, deleting some old pictures that I had on there, and I found this picture. It was like, "You got time for a vacation?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll be down to see you November 19th. And I laughed about it. I was like, "Ha, I don't know if we're going to be that good." Like, I'm always going to say that. But it was ironic that that's exactly what happened. And they had won the state title. They beat us in 2019 in the state semifinal, 41-0. And always a great program. They have players currently playing at Temple and UVA and several other schools. And we were able to finish our 12-0 season by beating those guys. And just some great moments from the game. You know, I was fortunate enough to have a great running back in Kai Hodge, who had 1,700 yards rushing and 31 touchdowns. Damian Mazel, who was our quarterback, who ran for 500 yards, but also threw for 2,500 yards and broke our school record. Threw for 35 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Carlos Smith, another guy who led the area in receiving with 43 catches, 19 touchdowns, and 1,300 yards, and broke our school record in those areas. And just a great group on the front line that really probably was a lot more of our question marks. You know, our center's 300 pounds, but our right tackle's 150. So you just find ways to make it work. You know, you teach them how to cut, you teach them how to run, you find plays that are going to work to that side. And guys want to run upfield, just massage them upfield. You know, you find ways, and you know, just a great group of guys, and even some of those basketball guys. Hey, you were a safety last year. You're a little bigger. Why don't you come down and play some linebacker? And different world down in the linebacker land, but just having a guy like Kenyon Wilkerson and guys that were able to step in and plug in and just use their athleticism to ward off some of those large linemen coming down on them was fantastic to see. And, you know, I'm sure there were a lot of people in that state championship game who might have said we belong playing that game in Roanoke and not here at the Sportsplex. But we were fortunate enough to see that game come to our place, and you know, it's really been unique to see teams in that environment. You know, we get the opening kick, go down and score. They get the kick, go down and score. You know, not too many teams have done that to us this year, so how are you going to respond? We drive down to the 2 and fumble. The 2, fumble. You know, great pass rush. The quarterback tries to throw. We wrap him up. He throws to nobody, and we get the safety for intentional grounding while the quarterback was in the end zone. We're able to go back and forth for a little bit right before the half. And this is the thing I constantly think of. You know, I've been to this show a couple times. When I was at LCA in 2003, we lost the state championship game to St. Anne's Belfield. I had Rashad Jennings on my team, who was a running back with the Jaguars, Raiders, and Giants for 9 years. He was my running back. St. Anne's Belfield had Chris Long, who's Howie Long's son, and who had a very successful playing career in the NFL. But I was 30 years old. You know, I'm playing in this game, and it was my third year as a head coach, and you kind of think, hey, I get 3 years into this, I'm already playing in a state championship game. And I'm not a proud, cocky person, but like, was it really that hard? Probably didn't appreciate it as much. Probably just assumed there would be more opportunities. But it was very stressful in that environment. 2008, I'm at Atlantic Shores. We make it to the state championship game, and my mindset was more like, don't mess this up. Your team is good. Just do what you're capable of. Run the ball. Don't put yourself in a bad spot. And we won. I don't know that I enjoyed it. The ride was very stressful. The kids were great. The school has been great, but it was just one of those things where I probably put a lot more stress on myself. My wife says she knows what kind of season it's going to be, that if I start talking in my sleep, I'm stressed out. She knew the last week we were playing for a state title, let's just say that. I was very encouraging of the referees when I was asleep. She's like, I think you're going to run the ball to the right a couple times. That seems to be your game plan. I was like, I don't know. You told me. Yeah. She's like, but you might have problems with number 3 on the outside. I was like, yeah, thanks. In 2015, we were able to make another state championship appearance against Nantucket, Suffolk, ironically, and there was just a lot of adversity through that season. Teams moving down in divisions that maybe were not supposed to, or perceived that way, or whatever it was. Things just kept coming up, and I had a great group of guys again, but probably just focused too much on the adverse things that were going on, and not so much on the ride and enjoying the kids and the moments. And I think that was one thing that I learned. In this business, there's a very fine line between being very successful and thought of on a high level and just not. I don't know any other way to put it. I don't want to say being a joke, but I'll give 2 examples. 2015, we played a game against Norfolk Academy. We had not beaten Norfolk Academy in years, and it went to overtime. They scored, kicked the extra point, we scored. We do a swinging gate play on every extra point. And we lined up before they were ready and scored, but we got called for a penalty. And then, both teams were called for a penalty. So we called a timeout, came back over. One of my assistants says, I think this version of that play will work. So we changed it. We throw the 2-point conversion off of the swing gate. Our guy's wide open. We score. Everybody's running on the field. People are tackling me. You're a great coach. You're this, you're this. And I always go back in the off season and tell my guys in preseason meetings, like, if that ball, when you go and look at it, their lineman's hands are up and the ball just goes over the top. A wide receiver who had never played football was the kid who caught it. And if he drops it, we lose the game. And it probably changes our seed from being the 1 seed to probably being the 3 seed. And there's such a fine line. So I'm a genius this moment, much like the Dallas Cowboys today. Like, you can say what you want after watching this game. If all those things work, what a great call. But when they don't work, you're an idiot. And that's kind of how I look at it. So I have to have a lot of humility in understanding those things. I try to pass that on to our guys. Like, I'm going to make some calls that you guys are like, what is he doing? Maybe I'm setting something up. Maybe I'm taking a shot. Maybe I'm doing this. But if we're all on the same page, it'll work out in the long run. The second example I give comes from this year's state championship game. At the end of the half, it's winding down. We're driving. We actually force a fumble in our territory and move our way down. The clock's running down. It's under a minute. I know how much time I have. I know the timeouts. Flashback 2 years ago, we don't score at North Cross. And on the next play, they throw a 98-yard touchdown pass. I'm not giving these guys any time. And I'm deaf in this ear. I got the headphones on this ear so I don't have to hear what's going on behind me. But I can feel this energy in the crowd, like, call a timeout, kick the field goal, do this. And I'm like, we throw an incomplete pass on 3rd down. There's 2 seconds left. We all knew what time and score situation was. And so we run a freeze play. I wasn't sure what look I would get. I just took a look, but we weren't going to snap the ball, but we acted like we were going to. They jumped. We get 5. We're on the 2-yard line now. They call a timeout, come over to the sideline. We start talking through our options. I can hear the people scream, like, because I took my headphones off, take the field goal. I'm like, and all week my message to these guys, like, we didn't work this hard to get here to just play it safe. We're going to go. So don't look over to me and go, we should punt, right? No, we're going. Going was the theme of the week. So we set up a play, which I thought would go somewhere else. They sent a house blitz. And a kid who was our tailback 2 years ago is now playing receiver, runs a slant. We take our all-state player of the year running back and put him in the flat. The corner freezes, there's no linebacker. And as our quarterback's running back and the ball is floating in the air, it probably took 10.5 minutes for it to land in my mind. Our guy hits the ground, hands underneath, we get the touchdown. And it's funny because that was, there's 2 seconds on the clock when the play started, so obviously 1.5, up 16-7, rather than being up 9-7 or 12-7 as much of the crowd was hoping for. And some of my friends who were in the crowd were yelling back at the people, were yelling me to kick a field goal. I think he knows what he's doing. It was, hearing the stories later, my wife's just standing at the top of the thing like this, giving me the look because I'm stressing her out way too much. She might be some of the reason there's a worn spot in some of the patio up there. But it was one of those things I think I learned just to appreciate those moments, and that there is a fine line. If Amir doesn't catch the ball, if they bat the ball going through, if we make the wrong read, our F wide receiver was wide open. There were a lot of things that went right on the play. But at the same time, 2 years or 5 years earlier, had another all-state caliber quarterback called a similar play on the goal line against Anton Suffolk. We didn't block it right, and as he went to throw, he got hit and fumbled, and totally different scenario. So I realized that there is a fine line between some of these things, and even some of the things we were doing when we were 1-9 in 2017. And we're 12-0. I tell my guys I'm very proud of them, and I don't think it's on them that we were able to go 12-0. And I start looking. We're the only VISAA school to go undefeated. There were only 3 teams in the state overall, public or private, that went undefeated. And to enjoy these moments, I'd have taken an 11-1 state championship. We were 10-2 in 2008 when we won. Either whatever way we can get to it, but 12-0 was very, very special. And I laugh. My coaches are like, "I know your heart rate." For whatever reason, I went to bed at 11 the night before, and I slept like a baby. They didn't believe me, and I went back and looked at my Fitbit. The only time my heart rate went over 100 the whole game was in the celebration. Like you can go back and pull out, I stretched it all out. And say, I did not feel this panic. Now, having great players will do that for you. Having all that work in the off season that went into those moments at William and Mary and everything else, just paid off for us. So it's been really neat. It's also really stressful. We got 5 guys wanting to go on and play college football. So going through those recruiting processes and trying to help them. I was a little late, what I thought was a little late getting here today because Penn State had come through and was asking about our 23s and 24 class athletes and who we might have. So that's always encouraging. But it's been a special year. Looking forward to next year, like I said, we start our workouts today. We have 14 juniors, 8 sophomores, 7 freshmen, and 2 8th graders that have varsity experience coming back. So that's 31 out of 39. We only graduate 8. The 8 guys who graduate are all starters in some way, shape, or form. So there's some big shoes to fill. But I'm encouraged by the guys. Like we went back at the end of the year and looked, we have 12 guys who've started a game for us on defense and 9 guys who've started a game for us on offense. So hopefully, if they are able to put in the work, we'll see a great off season. North Cross, though, is only graduating 4 guys. So I'm not circling my calendars yet, but I know there's a lot of work, and I know other schools will do different things to improve. But I'm excited to see where we're going from there, and it was a great season, great opportunity, and looking forward to seeing where my young men, how they develop with having this experience under their belt. So.